Well, I'd looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. There was a band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Well, I'm sometimes up and I'm sometimes down, coming for to carry me home. But I know my soul is heavenly bound, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home, tell all of my friends I said I am coming too, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Yeah.
If you have your Bible, please turn to the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verses 1 through 15. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John, although it was not Jesus himself, but his disciples who baptized, he left Judea and started back to Galilee. But he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where did you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." The word of God for the people of God.
Thank you, Blair. Good morning. I have a sad story to tell. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I was serving at a church, and I got a call. I think it was on a Thursday afternoon. And it was the youth director at the church. And she said, "Hey, I have a big favor to ask of you." Okay? She said, you know the youth retreat this weekend starts tomorrow after school on Friday, and then we're going to go out of town to this camp and have an overnight retreat, and then come back after we spend 2 nights and come back on Sunday? "Yeah, I know about that retreat." "Yeah, well, I've come down with a flu bug," she said, "and could you lead it?" So, about 24 hours notice on this. And I said, "Sure, tell me what I need." She said, "I'll email you some information." She did. In fairness to her, there was some stuff there, but there was also some stuff that I said, okay, we're going to need some supplemental materials here to fill this retreat up. And so I was sort of, on the fly thinking about what am I going to do here? Let's grab the guitar. We'll grab some prayer books. We'll get some other things. Let's think of some games that we might be able to play, that kind of thing. And I'm scrambling to do this. And so we went on the retreat. And for the most part, it was okay. Good kids. We had fun. We learned a lot. I was new-ish at the church at the time and got to know some of the kids a little bit better. It was a good experience. But there was something that was very troubling to me that happened on that retreat. And that was the first night we gathered around, and we were going to have this time for worship and singing and prayer and being by the campfire and on the edge of the lake, just like it's supposed to be when you do these kind of things, right? And so we had the campfire, and I brought my guitar down there, and I'm no guitar whiz by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm able to butcher a few, camp songs on the guitar. And so we're doing this, and I'm leading them, and I feel like I'm just singing solos. I mean, they're all real tight-lipped about this whole thing and not singing at all. And finally, I encouraged them. I said, okay, so I know that maybe you're not super keen on singing in front of your friends, and maybe that's not really cool when you're 13 or whatever, but give it a shot. And they said, no, that's not the problem. We've never heard any of these songs. And so I thought, okay, so maybe I'm just now, that's one of those moments where, you're sort of humbled and you realize you're the old guy in the group. And so I said, okay, well, let's just do a couple songs that everybody knows. I said, let's do Amazing Grace at least. I mean, we could, just so we can sing something together. Nothing. I said, what's the deal? We don't know this song, they said. Okay, I'll even do How Great Thou Art. What's that? They said. I said, okay, scrap the music. So we just continued on, and I was sort of surprised that they didn't know any of these. I mean, these are kids who grew up in the church. Surely they would be able to at least get through Amazing Grace. I mean, most people that don't even go to church can sing the first line of Amazing Grace. So then we get to the prayer time, and I led them, and much like I did just a moment ago, we did a prayer, and I led into the Lord's Prayer, and I realized I'm doing a prayer solo for the Lord's Prayer too. And I said, what gives? And they said, we don't know that either. What? Now, I'm dealing here with like 12, 13, and 14-year-olds for the most part. We got middle school, junior high age kids. And these are kids that grew up in the church. It wasn't like we went and picked out a bunch of kids who had never heard of church before on the street corner. I mean, this was kids from the church that I was a pastor at. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and then it dawned on me. The pattern at that church at that time was that when you came into the church on Sunday morning as an adult, you brought your kids with you, and you put them in the nursery when they were little, and as soon as the nursery time was over, or when they outgrew the nursery, then you would take them and you put them directly into Sunday school class. And what happened was, you would go from nursery to Sunday school class, and then when you got older, you went to confirmation, and confirmation met, guess when? During the worship service on Sunday morning. And so you were literally confirmed in that church, and you had not been to worship. You had not been to worship. Maybe Christmas Eve, maybe Easter. But I guess I expect a little bit more of that for somebody who just makes a profession of faith and joins the church and has been confirmed. I mean, twice a year doesn't really cut it. But was it their fault? No, of course not. That was the system that they grew up in. That's how we did it. That's how the church practiced what they did. Then was it any wonder that they didn't understand how to worship? They'd show up as a 14-year-old to church and not know when to stand, not know when to sit, not know what appropriate behavior looks like, not to know some of the standard hymns of the church, not to even know the Lord's Prayer. And I had a problem with that. And then the church would sit there and scratch their head like, why does the attendance sort of drop off for the kids once they finish confirmation? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's that they've been exposed to something as 14-year-olds for the first time in their life. I mean, that was a big thing. That was a part of it. And it has sat with me ever since. And I said, I don't want to be a part of a church that encourages that kind of pattern anymore. And I saw the danger in that. And I haven't looked, but I bet if I called back to that church and said, tell me about what you know about the faith practices of the kids who are in that group, now when they're probably in their 20s, I have an idea about what the outcome looks like. Truth of the matter is that church at that time took the attitude of, well, you know, church is really not geared toward them. I mean, worship is really not geared toward them. Let's do something that's more for them, more their speed. And so we can maybe do that in the Sunday school hour and give them what they need in that respect and do something that's age appropriate. And I certainly understand that, but I've seen the side effect of that as well. So, today I'm going to do something a little atypical for the sermon, and we're going to get to the text about the woman at the well that Blair read a minute ago. We're going to get there. But first I want to tell you this, that starting next week, which is the first Sunday of the month, first Sunday of October, I want to institute a new practice, and that is on first Sundays of the month, children stay in worship with their families. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. I've thought about this, I've read about this, I've prayed about this, and I've discussed about this with many people. And I think we need to do this. I think we need to do this. Because we're not a church that just puts kids in the nursery or in Sunday school or in children's church and they don't ever have exposure to the worship service, for sure. And this is not to take anything away from the excellent teachers that we have teaching during this hour where the kids, for the most part, are now. But my fear is that we are communicating a message to them by sending them out. And I would like us to get in the practice of at least once a month having them here with you. And then, if this goes well and you want to keep your kids, for those of you who have younger children, if you want to keep them with you in worship more often than just one Sunday a month, by all means, do it. Go ahead. But I'm telling all of you this message today because this is a church-wide thing that I think we all need to talk about, or at least you need to listen to a little bit today, okay? I'm sure we'll get to talk after this, but all right, so one of the things that I frequently hear, and again, I've been reading lots of articles, lots of blogs, scholarly articles, I've been reading this book, somebody's dissertation called Welcoming Children. I've read a lot of these materials, and it seems to boil down to a few different things that people mention as their concern when it comes to including children in worship. So, for example, one of the first things that often gets lifted up is, well, children's attention spans are not long enough to really, maybe, I don't know if they use the word endure, but to participate in worship for a whole hour. And what about a 15-minute or 20-minute sermon? I mean, children can't be expected to do that. And I would say, you're absolutely right. And adults can't either. I mean, if you look at the research, if you look at the statistical information about the average attention span for an adult, I mean, not only is it getting worse, by the way, but it's nothing even approaching 15 minutes. Okay, so I try my best to be engaging in my preaching to all of you, and I try to keep you on board and keep you with me. But I'm no under a false illusion that your minds don't wander off. I know that we drift off, that we daydream. Heck, I've seen people sleep. You know, I mean, that happens from time to time. But here's the point. How does this get better? We practice it, right? And it's the same for children. If children are not exposed to this and don't have the opportunity to little by little begin to practice what this looks like, then how is it that we expect them sometime later on in adolescence to all of a sudden get it? I mean, if they're starting at square one with attention span in worship when they're 13 years old, haven't we missed a really great opportunity for the first 12 years to help bring them up to speed so that they know what's expected by the time that they're 13? Another thing that we hear quite a bit is something along the lines of, well, you don't understand. This is like the one time a week where I get some quiet me time, some like reflective time, and this is the time where I can have my moment to worship. I need my just daddy needs some time, or mommy needs some time. And again, I'm a parent. I get this. I understand this. Heck, I preach, so I have my children are sitting with like friends in worship right now. They're not by my side or by Eleanor's side this morning. They're with other people in the congregation who sit with them. And so I understand this desire to have this special time apart. But I would ask you this, and this may sting. But if that's the one time of the week that's carved out for that, is that the appropriate time for that? I mean, truly, if you come to worship and that's the time that you've been looking forward to and craving as your alone time, I think that needs to be examined as far as the weekly routine, as far as carving out that time and that space. And I understand, but should the children have to deal with that? Because that's a concern of the parents. So I'm sympathetic. I really am. But I think that that's about finding another time for that and making worship the time that you can worship with your family and encourage and bring up your children along the way. Third argument that I usually hear is, well, it's over their heads, right? The worship is over their heads. And look, what I don't do when I set out to write a sermon each week is to think, how would a 4-year-old understand this? I don't do that. I mean, maybe I should do more than that, but I'm an adult preaching to adults. That's what I do. But that's making the assumption that what we're here to do is to learn. And I hope that learning is always a byproduct of what happens when we gather in worship. But learning is also what happens in Sunday school. Learning is also what happens in Bible study. Learning is what also happens is when we are fed in various ways throughout the week, daily devotionals, listening to radio shows, podcasts, whatever. We're fed and we learn in lots of different ways. But I would argue to you, and this is something that I found so helpful in this book, worship is not about us coming to learn. Worship is about us coming to have an encounter with the living God. And if we don't think about it that way, I believe that our understanding of worship is not only askew, but we're preventing our children from having that same kind of experience with us here in this room. So think about that. So next week, for instance, there's going to be some things that we're going to roll out and introduce. It's a communion service, which is a multi-sensory service anyway. We're going to do some things a little bit differently. We're going to have some things that we're going to encourage children to do. Karen and Allison are going to be making special children's sheets that are age appropriate, where kids can be looking for things, be listening for things, participating in things. And any kids who are listening, and parents, I want to tell you this. I'm going to start a new bulletin board here at the church that's for kids' worship art. Some of the most profound things that I have ever seen in a worship service are when children hand me their artwork after the service is over, and I will see that they understood more than their parents did that day about what was going on in worship. And so we're going to put that up, we're going to showcase it, and if it's worship appropriate, we're going to hang it up on the walls. And you're going to see what I'm talking about. All right, so now getting to the gospel. Our lesson today is about Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. And this is a really wonderful, rich story And we're not going to be able to do it all justice today because there's many sermons in this particular text. But Jesus is crossing to the north. He's going back up to Galilee. And he has to cross through this land of Samaria, which is where the Samaritans lived, which automatically is teaching us one thing about this is a group of people who is already set apart or different, who are not gelling well with the Jewish people, right? These people have been in conflict now for centuries. One of the things that happens is when Jesus is passing through, he stops at a well and he asks for a drink. And there's a woman there who is drawing water and he asks her for a drink. Now, first thing that pops into this story is this is one of those times that the Bible gives us a little bit of a clue about something that we should be looking for or listening for, because the gospel writer says that this happened at noon. So what if it happened at noon? It could have happened at 12:04 or 11:08. I mean, what difference does it make that it happened at noon? Here's the reason why it matters. In biblical times, and in most parts of the world today, where people have to go to a watering spot to wash clothes or to draw water from a well or so forth, you don't do it at noon. There is not a hotter, more unpleasant time of the day to be out doing manual labor than noon. You do this in the morning, or you do this in late afternoon or early evening, and that's what would have happened. The women from this village would have gone out every day in late afternoon when the sun is beginning to set, the temperatures are cooler, and this was social hour. This was a time for all of the women to come, and they would gather by the well, they would talk, they would catch up, they would be involved in each other's lives, they would draw water, take their buckets, do whatever they needed to do there, and then make their way back home. The fact that this woman is out at noon and by herself tells us something. It tells us not only the fact that she is a Samaritan and she is off limits to communication with Jesus for that reason, but that she's there alone means that she's a part of a community, yet she has been removed from that community. We hear in the story that Jesus already knows about the circumstances of her life. If you read a little bit further, a few more verses, we hear about this woman's past, about her multiple marriages, and so forth. And she has been ostracized by her community. She's been removed from them, and she is not welcome to go, or she doesn't feel comfortable going to the well at the same time as the rest of the ladies in the group. So she's there. And once again, Jesus has this encounter with somebody who has been cast out of the community. So he asks her for a drink, and she says, "You got some nerve? You know the rules? Samaritan, woman, seen as a sinner by my community. We're out here, it's just the two of us, this is uncomfortable, and you're asking me to draw you some water." Yeah, I am. But if you knew about the living water, you wouldn't be asking me about why I want a drink. He goes on to explain the whole thing. And that's another sermon. But I want to zero in on the well for a minute. If you go to the Holy Land, you go to Middle East today, and you find wells, more often than not, the places your tour bus is going to stop is at a tourist well, which means that it's a well of some significance, usually in the Bible, but it also means that throughout the years, people have sort of reinforced the sides of that well. You can sort of see when new construction is meant to look like old construction. You know what I mean? You go to some of these wells, and they look awfully well intact for being, 4,000 years old. But then there's some off the beaten path that haven't been touched as much. They haven't been given a little sprucing up over time. And when you find those old wells, usually crumbling, they've dried up centuries ago, but there's always something that's interesting about them. And if you look at photographs of them, or you have seen them yourself, you'll see that on the surface, you get these little walls that's built up usually in a circle or a square around the outside of the well so you don't fall in. But then on the top, that spot that's about waist high where you could sit down and put a bucket down in, that top has ridges in it like this, just like little waves, all the way around the circle. You know what that's from? Thousands and thousands of times of rope being lowered down into that well and pulling back up a heavy bucket of water. And it makes those grooves on the top of the well over time. But the thing is that when you look at them, it's not like all of the grooves are in one spot, like everybody went right here. They're all around the whole well, which makes you understand that people came from all around and came to their spot at the well and lowered their bucket in. And everybody, regardless of where they came from, who they were, or the perspective or their vision that they saw, they all dipped in to the same well. Everybody was drawing in to the same well. And to take this metaphor of our church further on, think about it this way. In Jesus Christ, each of us comes to worship at the church, and we all come into this sanctuary together, and from here we all put our buckets in and draw from the same living water. We all draw from the same water. I also know that we have the opportunity, when we come to the well, to have not only an encounter with God, but have an experience or encounter with others. We see others who share different or common understandings of things. We come in and we see from the eyes of somebody a generation or two older than us the wisdom that they have to impart on us. And I would argue that it also goes both ways. The problem with sending children out of worship or not having them included in worship at all, week after week after week, without changing that, is that not only do the children not learn how to worship with adults, the adults don't learn how to worship with children. And when we forget how to worship with children, we start getting real fussy about sitting on a Cheerio on the pew. We start getting real fussy about a child whispering a question in their parent's ear. We start getting real fussy about a baby who shrieks, which is supposed to be a sign of life continues and the cycle goes on, but people get upset about that. And if that's where we're at, then we have forgotten as adults how to worship with children. Not just that children don't know how to worship with adults. We can learn from each other, and it goes both ways. And I will leave you with one more story. Same church that I mentioned earlier. It's a few years later. By this point, by the way, kids are coming to church some of the time. First Sunday of the month. I got that idea somewhere. And this church had an annual tradition of, during the summer months, they would send a group of senior high kids and some adult volunteers usually to Kentucky or Tennessee, into the mountains in Appalachia, and they would help repair homes. And so this summer was no different. They were preparing to do that, and it was the tradition of all of the youth and their parents to gather in the church parking lot at about 5:30 in the morning on that Saturday that they left, and we would do a big hand-holding circle and say a send-off prayer for all of the youth who were going to go on this trip for about 10 days. Well, this always went on, and I never had any kids in the youth group. Mine were always too young. But I would get up early, throw some clothes on, and rub my eyes and try to get to church on Saturday at 5:30. We'd get there, and it would be a part of this prayer, which was always a meaningful thing. And this particular year, after the prayer was over, the kids got in the vans, off they went. The parents all began to scatter. They were going to go to Starbucks. They were going to go home. They were going to go on their run, whatever. And everybody scattered, except I noticed Grace. Now, Grace is still alive as far as I know. Grace was in probably her early 80s. I said, Grace, so good to see you here so bright and early. You came here for the send-off, for the prayer? And she said, I did. And I thought about it. I thought, well, your kids used to do this trip. And she said, that's right. And she said, and last year, Alex, my youngest grandson, went on this trip as a high school senior, and so he's not on the trip this year. I said, so you don't have any family members going on the trip this year? She said, no. And I said, well, that's sweet of you to be here. Why did you come out? She said, well, remember how when we baptize children, there's that part in the baptismal liturgy where the congregation says that they're going to be a part of nurturing and raising and supporting the kids in their faith? Well, I saw this as an important opportunity for all of these high schoolers. And I wanted them to know that I take those baptismal vows very seriously. And And I saw them when they were babies and they were baptized, and I promised to be a part of their life and nurture them through their faith development throughout the years. And I think that this is a big moment that I wanted to be here for, as I prayed for them and sent them on their way on this service trip. Grace realized that it goes both ways. It's not just about us mentoring and nurturing kids. It sometimes is about what they do for us. Those kids taught Grace about what it was like to give a week of your life to immerse yourself in another culture and to serve your neighbor. And she taught them that morning what it meant to stand by your baptismal vow, even as an 80-something-year-old, and seeing a 17-year-old get in a van and drive off to Kentucky. I'm not saying anything today with the hopes of making anybody feel guilty. I'm not saying anything that I intend to start controversy. What I am saying is that when we gather of all generations in this place, we do something that is not taking place anywhere else that I'm aware of in society, which is where you have the youngest and the oldest members of the community gathering around a common goal of having an encounter with the living God, to draw from the same living waters. And to make that possible is a unique thing that I would argue only happens in houses of worship anymore. It goes both ways. And it's something that we can be a part of. So next week, I hope that you will be praying for our families, and particularly our young people. And I would encourage our young people to be in prayer for all of you, because the grown-ups have something to learn too. And together we hope to come to this place as the body of Christ, to have a living encounter with the living God. Pray with me. God, we're never too old to stop learning. And we never stop learning from those who are younger than us, just like we never stop being mentored by those who are older than us. Help us as a community of faith to draw deeply from the waters of life. Help us as we come to this well each and every week to have an encounter with you. Guide us as a congregation. Guide us as a group of rich experiences and generations. And help us to know that your wisdom, your love, and your grace among all people can go both ways. In Jesus' name, amen.
Our hymn of dedication is Here I Am, Lord, hymn 593. We invite you to stand together and join us as we sing the first two stanzas, hymn 593. Please stand together. I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, I will dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright, who will bear my light to them, whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord, is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of snow and rain, I have borne my people's pain. I have wept for love of them, they turn away. I will break their hearts of stone, give them hearts for love alone. I I will speak my word to them. Whom shall I send? If I am Lord, is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
Friends, I hope that there was some challenge. I hope that there was some learning, but most of all, my hope is that you had an encounter with Christ today. May you continue to be nourished by the living waters of Jesus Christ, the bread of life, hope for the world, and encouraged and blessed by his grace. Go in peace and share that good news with the world. Amen.
Here